Thanks so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. It's a very diverse group here today. Board members, foundation board members, nurses, community leaders, philanthropy supporters. We need you all. And you wouldn't be here today if you didn't think this was a very special place. It is a very special place. And I've said more than once, for 150 years, God's had his hand on St. Joseph's. I was asked this morning to speak a little bit, share a little bit with you about the history of UMS, University of Maryland Medical System, and why we acquired St. Joe's, and how that's going to work in the future. UMS was created in 1984 by an act of the legislature when it was the University Hospital downtown. It was University Hospital and Shock Trauma Cancer Center downtown, the medical center. And it was constantly coming back to the legislature for deficiency appropriations, losing money, and basically it was bankrupt. And the legislature did something that very few states have done. It took a public entity and totally privatized it. I helped write the legislation, and early on, Dr. Callaghan, who ran Shock Trauma, wanted us to kill it because he thought it would ruin Shock Trauma. I came to the conclusion that Shock Trauma would have a very difficult time operating on its own without being part of something bigger. So I decided to work to get the legislation passed that would protect Shock Trauma. As a result, put in the legislation that always be a member of the Senate on the board, and I was the first Senate member appointed to the board. So I've been on the UMS board since 1984. But we totally privatized the hospital, took all the assets away from it. It was run by the university system, the University of Maryland system, and kept the name University of Maryland Medical System. But boards appointed by the governor, that's the only influence the state has at all, is human total appointments, which are done between the two, UMS and the governor agreeing on appointments. And it's worked phenomenally well since 1984. Starting with that $200 million bankrupt hospital, and I've been privileged to be on the board since the beginning, we started acquiring other hospitals, and I've had the privilege of chairing the committee that's acquired every one of them. And over the years, from that one bankrupt medical center, UMS now owns 12 hospitals, and is now a $3.5 billion system. If you think about it, if we hadn't privatized it, where it became a system, it's going to be very difficult for hospitals to survive in today's environment unless they're part of something bigger. It's going to be really tough for community hospitals, unless they're located in areas where they can exist that way. But it's going to be tough. So the fact that the state privatized the University of Maryland Medical System saved it. And think, how often do you hear of the government, either state or federal, giving up something to the private sector so the private sector could save it? That's what's happened. It's been a result of excellent board appointments. We've had phenomenal board members down there. So over the years, as we've gone through all these acquisitions, we're buying hospitals in the Eastern Shore, in Southern Maryland, Upper Chesapeake, one of the last, and I'm up in this area where I live, and we're not doing anything up here, and it's killing me. I'm thinking, God, I'd love to be able to get a position someday to acquire St. Joe's. Never, ever, ever thinking it would be possible. And then, of course, St. Joe's ran into difficulties. And as that happened, it became apparent to many of us that St. Joseph's needed help to survive. That it was not going to survive under the ownership of CHI, which I would say publicly was one of the most difficult organizations I've ever had to negotiate with or deal with in my life in the acquisition of St. Joe's Hospital. But I felt really strongly this was an opportunity for UMS to extend its reach north, which would make it a stronger system. And St. Joe's had so many special qualities that I saw. Janet and I have had 10 grandchildren born here. I hope I can do this without crying, but we had one grandchild that was born here stillborn. John and T went to the doctor that day and found out that the baby had strangled on the umbilical cord, and they said they wanted to deliver it. And we sat in the restaurant here in they decided that they would like to deliver the baby. And so they came over here. The baby was delivered, and I can't tell you the love for the staff and what they did they allowed Tina to deliver that child and hold it. At midnight that night, they called down and bring up, they have 5 children. Would we bring the kids to see their sister face? And we came in, and they were able to see their sister. Lived a minute in this world. It was absolutely perfectly formed. Every part of that child's body was perfectly formed. And this hospital kept that baby fresh so that we could visit that baby and bond with that baby for 3 days. Where else is that? Where else? So that is a personal story for me, but it goes beyond that. Our kids growing up very active and spent half their lives in the emergency room here. So we had that experience. But I just felt really strongly that this was a very special place and pushed hard to acquire it. And we were very fortunate to do that, as you all know, in 2012. Then the board said to me, and I hadn't really even thought about this and going through this acquisition phase, why don't you go out and chair the board? And I hadn't thought about it, but I thought there's nothing that's ever approached by that fit me more than it. You know, that's just like a shoot that fits well. I think I'd like to do that. I'd love to do it. Who are we going to get to run it? And the first person I thought of was Mohan, but I didn't say it. But Steve Birch, who's the chairman of the board, Bob Krenchik, who's the CEO, they both said, we think Mohan would be perfect. We all agreed. That's how long it took. And then Mohan and I came out here. And I'll never forget the first meetings with the staff here. I think we met with just about everybody, didn't we, Mo? And the looks on their faces, quizzical. They looked like they'd been beaten up, which they had been for a couple of years. But you could also see the dedication in their faces, and you could see the hope in their faces when they realized that Holmes was going to come to the rescue, which they did. And just think about this. University of Maryland Medical, St. Joseph's Medical System, okay? If it wasn't privatized, we couldn't have acquired St. Joseph's run it as a faith-based institution. Because Holmes is private, we could do it. So God's hand was even in that. So starting with the staff and those first meetings we had here, you could just see the hope that people had. And the more we got around, the more we met people, the more we realized just how special this place is. And you all know that. Well, you wouldn't be here today. Now, one of the things we got thrown a curve, you should know this, the hospital went from 24,000 admissions a year to 17,000 admissions a year in that 3 or 4 year period with the difficult times. Well, our goal coming out here, Mohan and mine, was to bring those admissions back. So we get out here, and what do? They change the whole reimbursement system. So you get penalized for new admissions. They don't want new admissions. And by the way, they don't want readmissions. I can understand that one. So we're faced with this. So they come up with this population health. I'm not going to get into all the intricacies of it, but population health, where every hospital is given an amount of money, they got to live with that money. The problem is they gave us the amount of money, for 17,000, 18,000 patients, when we're equipped to deal with 22,000, 23,000. So we're losing $50 million a year before we got here. And they said it would take 5 years to turn around, and the Irish and me said, no, we're going to turn around in 2 years. But I thought we were under the old reimbursement system where we were paying for those new admissions, you know. I knew we were going to, people in this hospital, those people were coming back. And so we got thrown a curve. We started this year with an anticipated loss of $50 million this year, which is our 3rd year. And they were getting a little nervous downtown. And I kept saying, Mo, don't worry about it, we're going to handle this. But opportunities, you know, I always feel that challenges create opportunities. Where you have an opportunity to make more friends, solve more problems, and make more long-term friends. So Mohan and I, as a result of this, got to meet the director of the commission that sets the rates. We met her here in this hospital. And we're in trouble. I mean, you're not reimbursing us based on what we deserve. And I remember in that meeting, I think it was Mike Hill, myself, and Mo, she was giving all these statistics and everything, and I said to her, well, let me ask you this. What would you do if you were in my place? And she came back with one or two answers that weren't really solid, and she knew it. So the meeting ends. That Monday, to her credit, I get a call from her at 7:30 in the morning. She said, I want you to know I heard what you said. And all weekend long, I'm thinking about it. I'm putting myself in your place. She said, you know, I'm a fact and figure person. I've got to have numbers to back it up. I know how important St. Joe's is. I know you need help. And we're going to do everything we can to work with you. But I've got to figure this myself. I've got to be able to sell this to the commission. And we asked for $20 million, and God bless her, they gave us $20 million. So the bottom line is, Moan's going to get into a little bit more about where we are now and where we're going. But from an anticipated loss of $50 million this year, it looks like we're with about $17 million. Oh, I'm not doing I can say she deserves the credit for what's determined. Mohan deserves the credit. Everybody in this room does. So anyway, from 50, we're going to lose 17. It's a lot of money. And then next year, we're anticipating 10. I think Mohan and I are going to shoot for 7. Can you imagine you shooting for a $7 million loss? You know, and that's good. But within 2 to 3 years, this place will be humming profitably. We're looking at a lot of new ways to create income that's non-regulated by the commission. We have some really entrepreneurial docs in this hospital, and nurses, and everybody in this hospital is entrepreneurial. And we have to be entrepreneurial now to survive in the future, which means we got to think differently the way we do things, the way we bring in revenues, the way we try to keep people out of the hospital at the same time we're a hospital that takes care of people in the hospital. So we're going to figure all that out, and we're doing it, and we're doing it good. So I just wanted you to know, and this is the other thing I'll close by saying, is I see Dr. McAfee out here. The doctors here are phenomenal. And Paul McAfee contributed, can I tell him?
You're on a roll.
He's always talking to me about Otto Brannigan, who was an inspirational leader for St. Joe's many years ago. Paul's always talked about Otto. And Paul had this idea for a digital library. And he wanted to name it after Otto Brannigan. He just donated $250,000 himself. So next door, if you get a chance before you leave, I want you to see the McAfee Brannigan Digital Library. There isn't a single book in it. But it is the future. And St. Joe's is so unique because not only are we a community hospital, but we're also research. We're not just clinical, but research. Very few community hospitals have the heart program, the cancer programs that we have here. We are so fortunate. We're in a great location with great people, with great programs. We can't help but succeed. And in closing, just want to say this to all of you in this room. Philanthropy is more and more important every day. You know, the government money coming in directly or indirectly is just not going to be there in the future. And we have to look to survive by raising money privately. This is not only true of hospitals. This is true of, I'm on the board of regents, the universities, the colleges. Most of the public colleges in the United States, a lot of them now are totally privately funded. Michigan's totally privately funded. Virginia's almost 100%. University of Virginia, almost 100% privately funded. Maryland's going to be there in 10 years, maybe less, I believe. So my point is that we as citizens are going to have to do more ourselves to pay for the quality of our education and for our medical care as well. So philanthropy is very important. And a lot of you here are here today because of that, because you've given and because we love to see you give more. We've got plenty of projects here. If anybody's interested in contributing to something, we can find ways to name it after you, all that kind of stuff. So I want to close. I want to thank, I know we have a couple of board members here. I saw Ed Gillis is our vice chair. Where are you, Ed? Ed was the chairman of the board, did a great job when he was chairman here. And when we acquired St. Joe's, the first person I called was I wanted to see Ed stay stayed as vice chairman of the board. And Ed, thanks so much for all you do. And Monsignor Jarbo was another one we went to. He was another original board member. We've added some board members, Jimmy Smith, former councilman, Michael Gill, who's economic development chief. I saw Gary here earlier. I thought Mike was going to be here. John Cole, who's one of the most influential men I know in national politics. These are the kind of people we want in on our board, and we catch some of the old timers as well. So we have a really good mix of a strong board. And then on the foundation side, I don't know, most of you know Ray Dow. Ray I've known for years, and I asked him if he'd come in and chair the foundation board. I don't know anybody that raises money better than Ray. I see Stu Solberg over here who volunteered to come up, and he's done tremendous work down at the University of Baltimore. And Stu's volunteered his time on the foundation. I don't want to miss anybody else because I know there's others out there. Sam Wells has been on the foundation board for years doing this. I don't want to miss anybody if I mention the names. Oh, and Carmen Dezo. The first two people, the stars of this place are Vicki and Carmen Dezo. When I came out here, Carmen's a lifetime member of the board. Vicki and Carmen have done so much for this place, I can't even remember all. But people like Vicki and Carmen and Stu and everybody all coming together to make this place better. It's already great. We're going to make it great. And now I want to introduce, I'm taking the speech away from him. But here's a very special guy who is just perfect for this job. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm aware he has opportunities where he could move on. He ain't going anywhere. All right? So the deal is, as long as I'm here, he's here. So make sure I don't die, Doc. But he's our man, and I love him. He's doing a great job, Bo.
Hey. All right, well, we'll have to figure something else out to say. It's okay. First, let me add my welcome and thanks. Thank you all for taking time out this morning to hear a little bit about what we are doing out here at the University of Maryland St. Joseph Medical Center. And I want to start, Mike Rossellini, thank you for your support for this speaker series. And as Senator mentions, many of you who are in the audience today are people who have contributed greatly to this organization. And Stu Silberg has taught me the concept of time, talent, and treasure. And many of you have contributed in various ways to helping in the revitalization of a phenomenal organization. And as Senator mentions, you know, this story of St. Joe's is a 151-year story, right? So while many in this community may have understandably focused on the last few chapters of the story, the truth is it is in fact a novel of St. Joe's. And Senator's right. As the University of Maryland and St. Joseph Medical Center came together now 2.5 years ago, literally almost to the day, 2.5 years ago, the challenges out here at St. Joe's were great. That number that he threw out there is absolutely the ballpark of the financial performance of the organization, right? So in fiscal year 2013, so not too long ago, this organization lost $72 million. And as I like to say, you have to work hard to lose $72 million in the state of Maryland, given the way the reimbursement system worked. And yet that was the reality that this organization faced. And there were some less enlightened individuals in the healthcare markets in Maryland who would have argued that maybe the best thing for everybody concerned was for St. Joe's to close. It would address certain economic realities. It would certainly change the competitive landscape of Baltimore County for healthcare, and perhaps that was the best answer. And anybody who, I would argue, who had that perspective did not fundamentally understand the foundation of this organization, did not understand the culture that existed amongst the people who make up St. Joseph Medical Center. And I would argue obviously biasly, that if the decision had been made to close St. Joe's, it wouldn't be the people who work at St. Joe's that would have been adversely affected. Yes, they would have found other places to work with their talent. It would have been this community that would have suffered greatly if St. Joe's had closed. So let's be clear, now 2.5 years later, St. Joe's is not closing. St. Joe's is absolutely on a pathway to profitability, and St. Joe's is absolutely positioning itself for being able to deliver health care in the future state of what health care will be, not just in Baltimore County, not just in the state of Maryland, but in this country. And the reason we can do that in a relatively short period of time, kind of turn the financial story of St. Joe's, has to do with the people of this organization. It is its greatest asset. So when you talk about a $70 million loss or a $50 million loss, or this year a $15 million loss, none of that math actually considers the greatest asset of the organization, which is its people. You look around this room and you see physician leaders who have dedicated their entire careers to the health care of this community. And these are physicians who could practice in any environment in this state, in this country that they choose to. They wanted to be the most brilliant minds in academic medicine. Many of them could have absolutely gone down that path. If they wanted to be in the biggest city in the country, in the most competitive marketplaces for healthcare, they could do that. And they've chosen to be here at St. Joe's, and they have dedicated their careers. So we talk a lot about the clinical pillars of excellence of St. Joe's. We talk about the orthopedic program that has distinguished itself through decades. Many folks may not appreciate that Towson Orthopedics, the longest, oldest private orthopedic practice in the country here at St. Joe's. Phenomenally recognized for its Dr. McAfee and his partners in the spine world, Dr. Delory in the joint world, the sports medicine programs. They are world-class physicians who are here at St. Joe's. The cardiac program, the cardiac surgery program, the cardiology program here at St. Joe's, again, is a program that is a phenomenal resource to this community. And so yes, there was a lot of attention that was paid in the last decade to the cardiac program, but the truth is, when you think about the size and scope and talent of the cardiac surgeons who exist here at St. Joe's, the cardiologists, you would, again, we are very blessed that they live and practice here in our community. So the OB program, the high-risk OB program, very specifically, is a phenomenal program that helps differentiate and give families and women choice when it comes to where they are going to have their birth experience. And to do it, the entire organization, as Senator Kelly mentions, is rooted in a faith-based delivery system. So what does that mean? How do you actually, how do you define that, right? So clearly there is a very defined relationship with the church and a way that we practice medicine here at St. Joe's. But very specifically, I heard Dr. Rossiter say this a few weeks ago in a meeting with her, and I thought it actually crystallized exactly what that means to be an organization that delivers health care with a faith-based approach. And that is that in everything we do, in every interaction we have with a patient, it is the respect for the sanctity of life that helps drive our core mission. And so whether you're talking about the mother-baby program or the orthopedic program or the heart program or the cancer program, it is that respect for life that helps drive the foundation of the organization, and that has not changed and that will not change here at St. Joe's. So as Senator Kelly mentioned, we came out here with a plan. He's right that we were down to 17,000 admissions, and we had a plan, and boy, there were a lot of folks who did a ton of work all around the idea of regrowing this organization. And regrowing meant bringing volume, patients who have choice in this community, bringing them back to St. Joe's. And those who may have historically gone elsewhere, convincing them that St. Joe's should be their destination for healthcare when the need arises. So the very good news is the plan's working. Volumes are growing. Patients are choosing to return to St. Joe's. It is as objective as we can be, it is our sense that the reputation of this organization is being revitalized in the community, and people are voting with their feet when it comes to making decisions about where they're going to get their health care. So that is the very good news. As he also pointed out, the challenge is the reimbursement system change. And so for that very good news, there is the economic reality, the financial reality of when you live in a global budget, all of that new volume comes at a cost. And I could thank a lot of people in this room for helping us through this time. But nobody deserves more credit than my friend Senator Kelly. And he referenced it when he said the folks downtown have started getting a little nervous about what's going on here at St. Joe's. And all of a sudden, all of that, he said there was great consensus 2.5 years ago when they thought about who the CEO should be. You know, the board chair and the CEO and everybody, oh yeah, Mo's the guy. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, suffice it to say, in the last 6 months, there are those downtown who may have questioned the wisdom of having a physician leader who had never actually served as a CEO run an organization and try and do a turnaround in this environment. And the person who kept their eye on the ball in terms of what we were doing out here, in terms of the way care was being delivered and the choices people were making while that financial reality was hitting us and while we were negotiating with the state, was Senator Kelly. Because I promise you that, and I understand it, you could solve the financial challenges of St. Joe's in many ways. And if financial expediency was the driver of making decisions, we could have changed the clinical offerings of St. Joe's and gotten this place to profitability in a year. It would not have been that hard. And if we had done that, I would argue then we would not have held true to our commitment to this community. We would not have held true to our commitment to the people who have dedicated their professional lives to St. Joe's. And so yes, we have been able to figure some unique relationships out with the rate commission and get some unique consideration for our circumstance at St. Joe's. But we have, again, as he said, you know, this was an organization in this year that was based on the growth we were seeing. His number was a little south of where it actually was. They were talking in October, we were talking about $60 million of loss in this fiscal year. And yes, the commission gave us 20. And yes, the number he's talking about is 15, which means that a lot of work and effort and energy of the people of this organization are helping close that gap. And while we're closing that gap, we're doing it in a way that I would hope my physician colleagues who are in this audience would say has held true to the fundamentals of what this organization is going to be about. One of the things that all of you who live in this community will continue to hear, given the uniqueness of the reimbursement system of Maryland, is that hospitals are struggling to figure out, should they be growing? Should they be constricting? Where should their access points of health care be? And I want to be clear in this message. I hope I have been clear within our organization. I want to be clear with this community. At St. Joseph's, growth will continue to be part of our equation. When you have programs that have the kind of clinical excellence that we describe, whether it be in cardiac and orthopedics and cancer and mother-baby and behavioral health, when you describe the resources that exist here, it is our responsibility to make sure that those programs continue to grow and that we continue to give people choice. And that word choice is actually very important. right? Because I'm a huge believer in the value of competition in life. And we are blessed in Baltimore to have a lot of healthcare choice. And I think we as St. Joe's are a better organization as a consequence of having that competition around us. We are definitely, you have to in life rise to the level of your competition if you want to compete and compete effectively, and I believe we are doing that. So when people have choice as to what emergency room are they going, people have choice who live in this community. We want our emergency room to be that solution. When people have choice about who's going to do their spine surgery, or who's going to do their heart surgery, or where is their cancer going to be managed, where are they going to deliver the baby, we want them to make an active decision to choose St. Joe's. Now, the new reimbursement system, again, I always like to start this conversation by saying I don't care what your politics are. I don't care if you are the most ardent conservative or the most liberal Democrat. It does not matter to me. What matters is that we get in the room and have a conversation about what this new reimbursement system in the state of Maryland is challenging us to do. And one of the things it is challenging us to do that I believe will make us a better organization is, as a system, hospitals are used to thinking about a patient from the time they walk in the door to the time they leave, and to maximizing that patient experience. And I would argue St. Joe's, we're really good at that. And one of the fundamental strengths of this organization that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I know anybody who has had any level of care at St. Joe's knows, is an unbelievable nursing staff. Not just a good one, not just a great one, an unbelievable differentiating nursing group here. And I see some of the leaders standing in the back of the room, and I'll be honest with you, as I thought about what I was going to say, I called Kelly over and said, go get the nursing directors. I want them in this room. Because you all need to know that. You need to know that when you talk about some of the strengths of St. Joe's, these are the people who make that impact on our patients. But when you think about, going back to that conversation about how hospitals are used to thinking about from the time someone comes in to the time they leave, the new reimbursement system and the national conversation about healthcare in general is forcing us as hospital and health systems to think about the entire continuum of care that patients experience. So on the front end, what are the things that we can do to prevent patients from needing to be emergently or urgently admitted to the hospital? And that has to do with primary care. And that has to do with managing diseases in a community rather than managing them then in the hospital. I think you could all imagine, I don't care if you're a physician or not, you can imagine that if you could take care of a patient's diabetes effectively so that they don't have diabetic crises that require admission to the hospital, then you have done something good for the health care of a community, right? So St. Joe's primary care is another pillar of strength of this organization, and it is one that we have invested in and will continue to invest in. So what can we do on the prevention side on the front end? When a patient is in the hospital, what are we doing to think about how do we transition that patient back into their community? What are the resources that we have? And again, one of the areas that I am proud that we have achieved at St. Joe's is partnering with private industry in this challenge. And so there are some folks in this room from Maxim Healthcare, and Maxim Healthcare is a company that we've chosen to partner with to create a pilot program in transition care. And taking a specific high-risk group of patients and transitioning them back into the community. But Maxim doesn't do that by themselves. They do it in partnership with companies like VNA. VNA, I think, is also here today. And that's a company that delivers home care services to patients in the home. But it is the coordination of a Maxim Healthcare and a VNA and the folks, the staff at St. Joe's, that is hopefully the direction that we are going as an organization, that says that we have to figure out our partnerships to be more effectively deliver health care to our community. Another example of that kind of forward thinking strategy that we're trying to put in place is a partnership we have just inked. Hopefully those press releases are, I think tomorrow they're coming out, with a company called Choice One Urgent Care. So many of you have seen urgent care centers, right? There are urgent care centers around this community and other communities. And the truth is, University of Maryland has, as a health system, hasn't jumped into that game yet. And so we at St. Joe's said, you know what? We're not waiting on the system. We're going to figure out the right partners, and we're going to take on that challenge. And so folks from Choice One, Butch Marino, is sitting in the back room there, back of the room there, and it's a partnership that is exciting because, as brilliant as my friend Butch might be, the truth is part of his brilliance was partnering with the right physician leader with Choice One, Dr. Scott Berger. Scott was an ER doc here at St. Joe's who went into the urgent care space, took an organization literally national, is local, and has partnered with Butch to bring Choice One to the forefront of the urgent care space. The reason St. Joe's cares about that so much is when you think about the continuum of care, the ability to have an urgent care access point for our community that's connected to the physicians at St. Joe's. So your primary care doctors can know what happens when you go to an urgent care center. The emergency room can partner with urgent care centers. For patients who need that level of care of an emergency room, it becomes a much more coordinated approach to healthcare than the historic silos that we have lived in. These are the examples of when you think about how we're positioning St. Joe's for the future. My hope is that you've gotten a flavor that, yes, we will continue to focus on our core business here at this hospital. And yes, the patient experience and the quality outcomes will continue to be top of mind here at St. Joe's. But so will our thought process about how the future of healthcare is evolving and how we need to make sure that we are positioned for that future. It would be so easy when you're talking about numbers like $70 million or $50 million losses to just focus on the turnaround, to just focus on get to break even and everything else can wait. But if we are going to be that resource for this community, if we're going to continue to do what we believe is the right thing to make sure that we remain the healthcare leader and the historic faith-based institution and organization that St. Joe's has always been, then we have that obligation to do it. So what am I asking of you as I wrap this up? I love to say that at St. Joe's, when we meet people for the first time, and they had their experience at St. Joe's, and they say, oh, how can we help? I say, tell somebody. Become an ambassador for what's going on here. Because nothing works better, especially in a town like Baltimore, than word of mouth, right? Nothing works better. And I see Fred Eisenbrand sitting here, and for those of you, hopefully, who got a chance to read the Baltimore Sun a couple days ago, Fred wrote an editorial to the Sun. Now, I have to admit to you that the Baltimore Sun, when I say that here at St. Joe's, I still have many people in the organization who flinch because of some of the recent past, last decade. But the truth is, the Sun, I will argue, since Maryland and St. Joe's have come together, has been very fair to this organization. They have reported as they're responsible to report, but they have also been willing to take a look at what has gone on here at St. Joe's. And Fred wrote an editorial about his sons and his family's experience here. And I think it helps crystallize what I am trying to describe to you about what is so special about St. Joe's. As the editorial describes, Fred's son has a rare illness, an illness that challenges his life on a daily basis. It is unusual that young people live past their 20s with this diagnosis, and Fred's son is in his early 30s, but he came to us incredibly sick. He spent 72 days in the intensive care unit. 72 days in the intensive care unit. He ultimately went home, and he went home, and yes, the people at St. Joe's did an amazing job, and Fred was so generous to have written this editorial that described their experience at St. Joe's. But an additional truth in that story is that he went home also as a consequence of the partnerships that we've been able to form. Because the folks at Maxim helped with the figuring out how we could transition him to home instead of to a facility. Because if the answer was get him to a facility, he would have left before 72 days. Getting him home was actually the part of the story that is, I think, defining about St. Joe's. So we have many challenges ahead of us. As Senator Kelly says, we have a budget for next year that still uses red ink. I will, what I can guarantee you is that as long as I am the CEO of this organization, we will push hard to drive this organization in a direction that positions us for success, not for the next few months, but for the next 50 years. That has to be the vision of what we are trying to do here at St. Joe's. The partnership with the university has been incredibly valuable to us. The programs, the cardiac surgery program alignment, the cancer program alignment with the university program helps bring size, scale, scope to this community. And when people have choice, having them choose St. Joe's is part of that value. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank my physician colleagues, the staff here, the nursing folks here at St. Joe's. You are the lifeblood of this organization. And whatever we do as an organization, we have got to ensure that we remain aligned with our healthcare community to take this organization forward. And you have my commitment that we will do that. So thank you very much. Thanks for putting up with us for a little extra time this morning. Please help yourself to some breakfast, shake some hands, and remember you are walking out of here as an ambassador of St. Joe's. Thank you, guys. Senator Kelly, as he's wont to do, pointed out something I missed, which is, yeah, please, if you have a moment, I think stopping by the library is amazing, and Paul, really, he and his family were incredibly generous. The Brannigan family, again, I think when you talk about the historic resource that St. Joe's has been to this community, Dr. Brannigan is a phenomenal example of that resource. But actually, as you walk around the entire organization, as Senator Kelly said, you see the power of philanthropy. It is alive and well in this organization, and what I would commit to all of you who have been so generous with your treasure is that we will be good stewards of those resources, that we will continue to ensure that your resources go to the healthcare of this community in a way that is consistent with the mission of this organization. So thank you. Thank you very much.
It's fabulous, really fabulous.